Hello, everyone. Welcome to this very exciting forum on low middle income countries. My name is Federica Di Palma. I'll be your chair for today. We have also with me, I have Mary Ann. If you would like to introduce yourself just briefly, please.
Well, my name is Marianne Van Sluis. I'm based in Brazil at the state of São Paulo, and I have worked for a long time on biodiversity. I'm very pleased to discuss lower and middle income countries in the APB challenges.
Thank you very much, Marianne. She will be my co-chair. And then we have our guest today that will start off our discussion. We have Professor Brito. Please, a quick introduction.
Hi, I'm a researcher, physicist. I've been for 15 years the science director for the São Paulo Research Foundation, where we run a biodiversity program. And now I'm the senior vice president for research networks at Elsevier.
And then we have Luis. Please, a quick introduction from you too, please, Luis, who I know very well.
Good morning, afternoon, and evening, depending on where you are. My name is Luis Calzadillas. Thank you. Great honor to be here. And I lead the science and innovation team at the British Embassy here in Colombia. Basically, my role is to connect both science and innovation ecosystems and connect researchers with funding opportunities.
Thank you. So I think what we'll do is I'll give just a brief introduction of the context, and Marianne will follow me with also a brief comment and introduction, and then we'll dive into the presentations from our guests. Panelists, and Luis Calzadilla will go first, followed by Professor Brito, and we do expect questions from the audience, of course, to make this rather engaging. So I'll just start by saying that clearly, as this conference has highlighted already so far, biodiversity loss, it's a global challenge, and more so are the consequences, of course, that this loss has on the ecosystem functioning and services. But I think it's worth mentioning that the negative impacts are obviously of this loss are more severely felt by the poor people and countries where normally the dependence on natural resources is higher and the capacity to actually utilize them is lower or at times is lacking. And this is further complicated, of course, by the complex social context of each of the countries. I am pleased to introduce today Luis Calzadilla, who I have been working for several years on the issue of biodiversity conservation, management, and preservation in Colombia. And I think that if we refer to Colombia in particularly, we have the complexity of a huge geographical and cultural diversity, and also a nation that is transitioning into a post-conflict scenario. Colombia had been devastated by a civil war for many, many years until 2016, when the peace agreement was signed. And clearly this biodiversity loss, coupled with the growing post-conflict demands for different types of ecosystem services, presents huge challenges, not only for science and research, but for policy and decision making. And therefore it's extremely important that nations collaborate and partner under a shared vision that is centered on biodiversity as a mean to achieve sustainability and also maintain peace in Colombia. Mary.
Thank you, Federica. I will continue this presentation, bringing also the attention that the organizing committee envisaged this forum to challenge the audience and the speakers about the opportunities that knowledge brought by understanding biodiversity and its conservation could result in a bioeconomy-based and more sustainable approach to leverage science education in the different countries. And I think Professor Brito will represent that very well, because he encourages young researchers and the scientific community for over 15 years in the state of São Paulo to bring new ideas and to contribute to the science, technology, and innovation infrastructure from the state and in Brazil as well. As he mentioned, we have a very strong program on biodiversity, and followed from that, we also have the Global Climate Change Program and the Bioenergy Program. And the three programs together could contribute with very strong information-based recommendations to our science public policies, in fact, in Brazil and as well in the state of São Paulo. I think it will be a very interesting discussion, and I will give the floor to Federica back. Thank you very much, Federica.
Thank you, Marianne. You bring up a really important point, because clearly we are here today in this conference also to highlight the innovation, the technological innovation piece, and how we can accelerate the sustainable use of biodiversity to promote a country's bioeconomy. And that's the only way for this country that are so reliant on natural resources. I would like now to introduce Luis Calzadillas and give the floor to him. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So I will start sharing some thoughts about the partnership we have been building between Colombia and the UK in its or in the joint scientific effort to work together towards solving common developmental challenges. So the first thing I would like to mention that has been critical in the success of this partnership, without going into detail about the two tools that you might be aware of the Newton Fund and the Global Challenges Research Fund. And the reason I'm starting here is because these two tools, funding tools, provide energy to the engine of this bilateral scientific collaboration. And Newton, in particular, builds an architecture for scientific collaboration that can then and has been capitalized by other researchers coming, for example, from the GCRF stream of funding. So I think part of our experience here to build a big scientific partnership has been a matter of using existing connections that we had from the Newton Fund environment to use them and put them at the service of other initiatives that have come after through the Global Challenges Research Fund channel. So it's kind of using existing connections while building new ones that are natural in the process of each of any research project. Second thing I think that has been really successful for us in our process to work together as countries is that Colombia and the UK have prioritized biosciences within their common scientific interests since 2014 or 2015. So that's starting to pay off, in my opinion. And the fact that it's been a systematic effort has provided the strength to that relationship to build up a common floor to keep working together in the future on biosciences. That, of course, brings the fact that there seems to be, and I believe there is, a stable system in place that favors joint work on biosciences So from a political perspective, Colombia has been paying attention to its biodiversity consistently since 2014, 2015, as I explained, and that has created conditions for long-lasting scientific efforts on this matter. And just to give you an example, I mean, the last two governments, and I mentioned the governments here because referring to the political will to work on this is really important. And the last two governments have prioritized different angles of biodiversity, but the topic itself remains there at the top of the agenda. And to be honest, nobody is questioning at the moment, or has been questioning, whether it should continue to be a priority or not. So biosciences and biodiversity are there as a core part of the agenda. As Federica mentioned, there's also a component related to the peace process, which has created positive conditions as well for science to operate in context it didn't have access to before. So, for example, working today with ex-combatants, former guerrilla members, that was an utopia 20 years ago, and it is possible now. Of course, it sounds romantic, and I won't go into the details, particularly because this is one of those subjects where Colombians are highly polarized. But this is definitely harder to do than it sounds, working in this context. But the point I'm trying to make is that today it's possible, and only the fact that it's possible with its limitations or problems, it's a very good news for global science working on biodiversity. The other thing, and as Federica was explaining, I think, and explains part of the success of this partnership between the UK and Colombia working on biosciences, is that Colombia recognizes the value of the work that the scientific community collectively does, and the wider system relies on scientific evidence that the work is producing to inform policies and decisions. So in this sense, I think Colombia, or from where I see it, Colombia welcomes the work you are collectively doing as part of the Earth Biogenome Project, as there's a pressing need to find nature-based solutions to development challenges Colombia is facing, and to be honest, the entire world is facing under the wider climate change debate. The other thing I think has been really, really useful and explains part of our role in the embassy is connecting projects, it's connecting dots and connecting PIs of research projects, so that the whole approach to our work on biosciences is coherent. So it sounds really obvious or simple, but having PIs talking to each other and knowing what each other is doing is key in our effort to produce scientific evidence together. I don't know how this works in other countries, but at least in Colombia, and at least for my role, it's been key to work with the Colombian scientific diaspora in the UK. So working with Colombian scientists there who have understood that their work also includes sometimes not only a scientific angle, but also some kind of lobbying with UK institutions so that those institutions do science with Colombia. So to be honest, I rely a lot and have lots of exchanges, both formal and informal, with Colombian researchers working in the UK, because they are a perfect mechanism to bring Colombia to the attention of those institutions. And that's linked not only with Colombian scientists, but also with the wider community of PIs we work with, to something I would like to highlight, and it's that there is a huge role of some PIs who have read and understood that their role is not only the obvious scientific one, but also sometimes they have a more political role. And the fact is, in practice, is that doing science with countries like Colombia, and I'm sure this applies to other low and middle income countries in the development world, implies navigating sometimes some politics and bearing with your local partners who are sometimes navigating those waters with you or for you sometimes. So sometimes I know this is exhausting and could be disappointing for UK colleagues, but the suggestion and the recommendation we always give is to bear with them and don't give up, because working internationally deserves this effort, and in our experience it works. And perhaps just to finish this intervention, the other thing we try to do, and I think explains in a way the success of areas of our work together, is that the more scientists connect with the common scientific priorities, the better and easier the process will be. And when I speak about priorities here, talking about the wider spectrum of priorities between the two countries, because after all, the scientific element is only one part of a bigger and wider relationship between the two countries in the process to build equitable partnerships. So I think I'll stop there and perhaps leave room some questions the audience might have.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have some question. So, Luis, one question from Camilo Chacon-Duque. What do you think are the big challenges for ensuring the continuity of these collaborative projects between developed and low middle income countries?
I think challenges, for example, the main one is always funding, or is usually funding. Particularly in the context where we are, globally speaking, the pandemic is representing and posing a huge challenge in funding. For example, and I'm referring for ODA funding here, because it shrinks in the sense that it's tied to GDP, at least, for example, in the UK. I mean, if it's coming from the 0.7% of the GDP devoted to international cooperation, if the GDP shrinks, of course, that percentage is reduced as well. The other challenge, which is also related to the pandemic in a way, is that, I mean, the situation we're going through implies, I mean, there are different voices raising concerns and raising flags around the achievement of some of the Sustainable Development Goals. So things like gender, things like poverty become challenges as well, because we will see that different SDGs will have different progresses, and the pandemic is also affecting that, and it's going to be affecting that. And there are positive notes here as well. I mean, obviously, on poverty and gender issues, we might be a bit behind. While, for example, if you look at the SDG around building partnerships, I mean, numbers 17.6, I would say, about knowledge sharing, etc., that will progress much better. But I would summarize challenges around funding at the moment, and around the fact that we will find pressures from other SDGs that will, of course, impact the work we are doing together on biosciences.
Thank you, Luis. And I have another question from Camila. How sustainable is to keep expensive genomic infrastructures in those countries, given import prices, high warranties, and difficulties in maintenance?
Well, infrastructure is usually a challenge. How expensive? Really expensive. And particularly because there's a lot of technology that changes very frequently, and it's so easy to be out of date when it comes to that kind of infrastructure. So basically, my answer to that is around that area. But also that we usually rely on colleagues to provide advice to Colombian partners on which technologies to be using as well, and which technologies can be shared so that that risk is reduced.
I actually have also a little bit to add to this question, because as you know, Luis, as part of the Mission de Sabios, we advised the Colombian government for their science, innovation, and technology agenda over the next 10 years. And during that process, this question has come up. And I think that the advice that everyone agreed on was absolutely build capacity, because there's much needed capacity to be built and infrastructure, but up to a point, in order to accelerate the biodiversity-based bioeconomy, particularly the regional, in the regions at times. There are platforms that are really well established outside of Colombia, and it was encouraged to use and partner to use these platforms for the simple reason that one needs to keep a really good balanced mind about this. The time and expenses needed to build a platform from scratch will take 10 to 15 years alone. So one has to think about achieving as well using what's already been set up internationally, but at the same time building capacity in the country.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that was precisely my point about sharing infrastructure, because, this is, as many other instances, one example of how we collectively are stronger than in isolation.
So this concludes, there are no more questions, but I want
Professor Brito. I think
yeah,
Professor
I was
Brito
going, yeah. Oh, yeah.
No,
I was going to say, I was going to open it. I was going to open it up to us as a panel, either Anne-Marie or Professor Brito. Yes.
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Yes,
yeah,
of course.
My question, Luis, relates to the SDGs. Are you, in your network, considering the possible interplay among SDGs? For example, as you lift people out of poverty, you fulfill one of the SDGs. However, the region will use more energy and probably cause more emissions.
That's an interesting one. Well, I have to say that we have teams devoted working to work on SDGs, and it's not my particular focus, but I'm sure that's part of those reflections, because well, at least the meetings I have been exposed to, and the documents one reads allow you to see that there will be not an homogeneous progress in all of them at the same time. So that situation might be happening, and I'm sure that experts in each of the areas covering the SDGs will be taking that into account, because that's completely possible.
Thank you.
Marie, do you have a question?
No, I don't have a question.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, thank you. So I think I will conclude this session, and I'll pass it on to you, Anne-Marie, to introduce Professor Brito.
So as mentioned earlier, it's a pleasure to have Professor Brito here. He has a background in physics, but he really likes biology. And I think we have an opportunity to have his view on the challenges and the opportunities to develop the bio-based economy, and what were the challenges and difficulties eventually that were brought up during his directorate at the FAPESP Research Foundation. So Brito, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie. Thank you very much, Frederica, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with Luis in this session. I'd like to share some slides. Are them on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a very brief overview of biodiversity genomics research in Brazil, starting with the description of the main programs that we have. And I believe that the strongest one and the main one at this moment is a program that we started back in 1997. So that's like 23 years ago, which is called Biota FAPESP. It's a program that congregates more than 200 scientists, thousands of graduate and undergraduate students. Initially, they studied the biodiversity in the state of São Paulo. In their second phase, they have 10-year phases. In their second phase, they devoted their interest also to biodiversity in Brazil as a whole. And another important program is a national program that was organized in 2009, which is called the CISBiota, which now congregates scientists from all states of Brazil, contributing and building a national research network. Those researchers are supported in fields related to genomics by sequencing facilities which exist across the country, 3 of them in the state of São Paulo, 1 in Rio de Janeiro, and another one in Pará, in the Amazon region. So that composes a network of scientists devoted to understanding the biodiversity in Brazil. To go a little bit in detail into the Biodiversity Virtual Institute that we have at the São Paulo Research Foundation, Biota, as I mentioned, a network of more than 200 scientists, thousands of students. They already graduated hundreds of PhDs, master students, and so on, who now work in several other universities across Brazil. And their aim is to characterize the biodiversity in the state of São Paulo and in Brazil, as I mentioned. And also they have a second objective, which is more challenging, I think, than characterizing the biodiversity, which is defining mechanisms for its conservation and sustainability. And then the third step is even more difficult because it relates to convincing the government to use what they learned in order to conserve biodiversity. So they do that by research, by disseminating data, information, and knowledge. They increase awareness of public and private organizations in Brazil, and they promote informed decisions. They have a website at biota.org.br, which has a summary of their achievements. At the São Paulo Research Foundation, as Professor Marie-Anne mentioned, there are other programs which now connect to the Biota FAPESP program, one in bioenergy, another one in global climate change, and a fourth one in e-science and data science. They all are related. They have some strong intersections, especially in topics related to genomics. As an example, the National Network of Researchers feeds this database, which we call Species Link, which integrates data from all regions of Brazil. You will see there the red squares relate to animals, the green ones to algae, fungi, and plants. Then there are fossils in purple, microorganisms in blue, broad scope organisms in orange. So it's a broad network that covers most of Brazil. Brazil is a large country and large in terms of biodiversity. Before I finish, I just wanted to show to you some of the results in what I highlighted in my introduction as the most challenging part, which is how to connect biodiversity research to government action to protect and to conserve biodiversity. And in this slide, I show an example. This is a resolution by the Secretary of the Environment in the state of São Paulo. And we have several dozens of those resolutions and decrees and laws. And what we especially like about this is that in the introductory paragraphs, they have here written, I'm going to translate to English, considering the results obtained by the team of researchers of the Biota FAPESP project and the information present in the map prioritized areas, the state of São Paulo defines that conservation, and then they go to Article 1, Article 2, Article 3. This little map on the side is part of one of those resolutions. So it's a very interesting and I should say not infrequent connection between good science and conservation initiatives backed up by a government. This is another one of these leaflets by the state government in the state of São Paulo, displaying where there are connections between pieces of forest and where biodiversity should be more paid attention to, and instructions and so on. So that is to show that all this research and this network of scientists, they do excellent research, they discover things, they connect to the best centers in the world and contribute to the advancement of knowledge in biodiversity, while at the same time working to improve conservation and sustainability of biodiversity in Brazil. And I want to conclude just by summarizing that we have in Brazil several initiatives related to biodiversity research, national initiatives, which include a national database, a data collection network, state initiatives like the ones done in the state of São Paulo by the São Paulo Research Foundation, centers of research, like, for example, we have a center in partnership with Embrapa, which is the national company, national organization for agricultural research about genomics and climate change. We have a center on structural genomics and another center on human genome. And I want to end by highlighting to you that there is a lot of that research that focuses the Amazon. I have to say that because if you read the newspapers and you read things that the Brazilian national government has been saying, you might be led to think that Brazilians don't care about the Amazon. But that's not like that. It's the other way around. We care a lot about the Amazon, and this publication, which is at this link, which I reproduce here, will show to you that the portfolio that the São Paulo Research Foundation has on research about the Amazon is one of the largest in the world. I'm not saying the largest in Latin America, largest in the world, all aspects about the Amazon, the trees, the rivers, the waters, the microorganisms, the leaves that fall, how the decomposition of leaves contribute or do not contribute to carbon emission, in which season of the year carbon comes in, carbon comes out. So this is something that the science community in Brazil demonstrates a lot of interest, and this publication will help you to understand that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brito, for your presentation. We have some questions from the audience. One of them is posed by Harris Lewin. Harris asked, what is the best way for the international science community to support the efforts to study and conserve biodiversity?
Well, thank you, Harris, for the question. Yeah, I've seen your question before written in the question list. One of the ways in which lower and middle income countries would be helped by the international community is through opening of opportunities for collaborations. And You and your colleagues have been doing that intensely with the Earth Biogenome Project, and many research funding agencies across the globe have been developing connections and collaborations with funding agencies in Latin America. So I have the view that research collaboration is the main path for this for this contribution. Now, I have to stress a little point about that, which is the fact that by research collaboration, I mean research collaboration. I do not mean what many governments in Latin America consider as research collaboration, which is exporting the brightest students to the best centers in the world. Research collaboration is a two-way path in which researchers from Latin America or from lower and middle income countries will work together with colleagues from developed countries in challenging research projects. It doesn't have to be a 50-50 effort. They will do part of the work, the colleagues in Cambridge, in Davis, in Berkeley, wherever, will do another part of the work, but through collaboration is the way to, is the path to raise the interest and raise the capacity of doing research in lower and middle income countries.
I would add also that absolutely collaboration is a foundation that is needed, but on top of that, and I know there's a question from Kath Brucebank about this, I think it's necessary to bring together funders and to put substantial resources into this so that then we can really achieve the needed impact. Obviously without the collaboration, the funding won't help, but I think if there's a solid collaboration, then funding to these collaborations are the way forward.
Yeah, and I think I would stress that during the leadership of Professor Brito at FAPESP, one of the major impacts was to increase the collaboration between researchers from the state of São Paulo around the world. And I think this is one of the provocative actions that Professor Brito brought. We hope that...
Yeah, that is, I think, Frederica...
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I'm sorry, Marie. Go ahead, finish your talk, please.
No, go ahead. I was just going to leave you the floor.
No, my point, I would just want to comment on, I very much agree with Frederica's point of mobilizing funders. But I just want to add that external funders, the way I see it, external funders cannot substitute for local funders. They can add and contribute, but as long as a region or a country cannot organize some way of funding even small things, they are not able to define an agenda of research which is relevant for them. And having an agenda which is relevant for the region seems to me to be very, very important. So I would just add that external funders might be relevant together with local funders, even when the local funders are small.
One aspect I think it's important is how to communicate with those different actors. And is there a strategy that we could envision locally?
Well, yes, Marie, I think there are strategies that can be devised locally. And one of the strategies that I feel lacks in Latin America would be a strategy favoring collaboration among Latin American countries. You see, one sees too little of that collaboration. And for example, for the Amazon, we should find ways to have more collaboration between Brazil, Peru, Colombia. So that would be, I think, a relevant challenge for this particular moment.
Thank you, Brito.
So there is a question about Maria, about the Amazonia project for Brito. I wondered if he could comment on that. The question is, have you heard about the project Amazonia 4.0? If you have, how successful you think a project like this will be or can be for the communities in Brazil?
I haven't heard of this this project. I'm sorry. I wouldn't be able to comment on that.
There is a question, but this was directed to Luis, but I think could also be presented here. That is on how the interplay among the SDGs could lift out the poverty, energy, and energy consumption. It's how do we see the interplay among the SDGs as people are lifted out from the poverty, energy consumption will increase and leads to more emission. You mentioned that during his talk. How does it present in Brazil?
Yeah, I think it presents everywhere. My point in the question was to bring out the fact that many times we tend to think of the SDGs as objectives which we would track separately, but I don't think it's like that. It's necessary to have a systemic view about them, because for sure, when you improve one for some time, you might see a decrease in other SDGs. And the one that I exemplify is a typical one. As people get richer in lower and middle income countries, they will want to use energy as much as the people they know in the United States or in Europe use energy. And as you use more energy, most of the time it's energy that causes more emissions. So it's a challenge for the SDGs, looking at that in a systemic way.
Well, the Earth by Genome project is also a challenge because we want to sequence all the eukaryotes that are known, and biodiversity is not evenly distributed. So one of the questions is how to bring together the different partners from rich, lower, and middle income countries to contribute to that challenge.
Yeah, well, it seems to me that this goes back to the point on research collaboration, right? Where, again, I stress that it's very important that you have some degree of symmetry in the collaboration. So it cannot be collaboration like in the beginning of the 20th century, in which researchers from Brazil or Latin America would take blood from people in the regions and send the little glasses of blood to the United States or to Europe for the research to be done. It's not like that. It's research which has some protagonism in both sides of the Atlantic, if you're talking about Latin America. So looking for in the way, I think it's much easier to do that today because the awareness in Europe and in the United States, in the science community at least, about inclusion and diversity is much higher than it used to be 70 years ago. So we should include in the thinking about this awareness on inclusion and diversity, the awareness about research collaboration having a sizable or a reasonable degree of symmetry.
Thank you, Brito. Federica, can you read the questions from the audience? I'm having trouble with mine.
No, I can read it. There are several questions. I wondered that were for Luis, but I think it can be applied here as well. And I do know that the UK has several programs. The GCRF program is targeted for the early career researchers. There are obviously but people are wondering what programs can partnership with the developed country can be put in place to support students and early career researchers. And most importantly, also people that can go back after having had this training, can be facilitated to go back to their countries to continue the work.
Yeah, that's a big challenge, Frederica. The one of people, young researchers, mostly coming back to their countries. But there are some successful initiatives in that. For example, here in the state of São Paulo in Brazil, since 1997, the São Paulo Research Foundation has been offering a special funding for young researchers of any nationality. They do not have to be Brazilians. Most of them are, but of any nationality, who are willing to come from another country to start a science career here in the state of São Paulo. So many of them came from Germany, from France, from Canada, from Pakistan, from India, from Argentina to start a career here, and they stayed here. So doing this since 1997 means that the foundation brought to the state of São Paulo more than 1,300 scientists, young scientists. There are interesting cases. For example, a person who came in the first call, 1997, from Germany, 7 years ago, so the person came in 1997. 7 years ago, that was 2013 or 2014, this person became the president of one of the good research universities here in the state of São Paulo. So it's a case of brain gain, not brain drain. So again, it goes to my point of there must be some local initiatives. The world is not going to build things for us here. The world might help us to build the things that we want to build, but local initiatives are absolutely necessary.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, I'm about to actually give the plenary next, and I will talk about our work in Colombia. And I can just say that, honestly, the success, the most success is if there is political will and coherence of this political will with what internationally also we are trying to achieve. But locally, there has to be a will and a prioritization also to make this happen. And when that happens, the success is and the impact is immense. When that doesn't happen, it's more difficult. So absolutely.
I will add to that the fact that we need to have the society to be aware of the contribution of science. And this is another, not only the politicians, but also we have to have a way to communicate science to the society so the society understands. And I think this situation in which science is not understood makes people refrain the investment also. So I think there is an important way to communicate, and the Earth by Genome Project is willing to help communication. And I think this is a much needed action also for the politicians to understand the relevance of science. Okay, this is the point.
Yeah. I think we are perfectly on time with the end of our panel, which was really exciting. The audience has raised some really important questions, and there are even more questions which I have made a note of for that I think Prof. Brito and Luis could look at and take with them. I want to thank you, Professor Brito. I want to thank Luis Calzadilla, and thank you, Marie-Anne, for assisting me with this. And well, I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yeah,
thank you very much, Frederica. Thank you, Marie. And thanks to all who watched and asked questions.
Thank you to everyone
Thank
as
you.
well. Thank you. Bye.